So I think this discussion, we have three people up here with huge experience in the community and in life and all sorts of areas. And one of the things that comes across sometimes in current affairs is being neutral or fair, or how far does free speech go? We're very much in favour of people having their say, but when is it inciting bad behaviour in the community? When is it going to damage people? How is it going to hurt? And then if anybody who gets involved with the radio, you do a lot of training on libel and things like that, how to be very careful about what you say on the radio as well, what you can and can't say and how you can say it and when and who and whatever. So it's a difficult area to develop a policy around. And this is why I think we wanted more input into it, if you like, from the members, so that we develop a policy which really does represent people's viewpoints and not just the small groups that develop our policy. I mean, policies try to be developed as broadly as possible. Obviously, the more people you consult, the more difficult it is to get the information together and form an actual policy, which must be a statement of fact, so that you can say whether you're sticking to the policy or you're not sticking to policy. And at the moment, our policy is too vague on current affairs, so we're looking to tighten it up a little bit without losing the ethos, if you like, of Near FM, which is supposed to be inclusive and broad and allowing people to view, to express their views and their viewpoints, and to take on extreme viewpoints, in as far as possible. So this is what I think, if I'm right.
Sounds good.
So we're going to allow these two people, who each have quite strong opinions on this topic, to give us don't become me, you do, I know they do. And also, I mean, they'd be coming from freedom and artistic, as well as community protection and things like that. So there's different kind of aspects. And their hearts, the hearts of these three people is definitely in Near FM, because I've known them all for years. So they have good intentions, and that's what makes it even more difficult when there's debates or discussions or disagreements, because everybody has good intentions and they're all right. Do you know what I mean? They're all correct. So we'll start, I think, should we start with you, Mick? Do you want to go first, or would you rather go last?
Go ahead. Jack was going to go last, but I thought Jack was going to go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Coop in first.
Nick, you want to...
I'll go.
Oh, go ahead. He's just doing that.
Well, all right, look, I'll make a decision. We're going to go alphabetically. Jared, you're going to start.
No, Michael's going to go.
Oh, is he?
Go ahead.
Get him all.
You see, everyone is to agree on it.
Maybe I'll try and set the tone. What is current affairs now? There's two ways I could do this. I could go out and tell you, which politician is married but gay. We'd all love that. Or which radio DJ had an overdose. And we'd all love that too. But I'll leave that for the tabloids. So the way I approach it is, what are we trying to get out of this, and who are we trying to communicate with? And I do 4 different programs that you would classify as current affairs. Now they vary considerably, and I suspect the audience does as well. The morning one is almost a mixture. The motive is almost to entertain, because who wants to be preached to at 11 o'clock in the morning? You get that from me anyway. But so you try and be cognizant of an audience, and what are we trying to do with them? And I usually try and say, well, I'm trying to do 3 things. Hopefully inform them, hopefully to a certain degree educate them, and I don't mean that in any prescriptive sense, and also hopefully entertain them. Now, clearly there are certain subjects, they're not terribly entertaining. You've got to make judgment of that. So what I'll perhaps try and start off with is by saying how I tend to approach it. Now I tend to approach it is almost what I would call a value-driven approach. The 2 values to me that are incredibly important are liberty and responsibility. They're the cornerstones of democracy. Now I say that because I wasn't always a Democrat. I didn't always believe in what I would call the democratic system. In many places you look around, it's corrupt. In many cases you look around, it's repressive. I'm particularly concerned with that in this country at this time, because we are getting some very, very repressive legislation coming in a lot of ways that I don't think is helpful, particularly the way it affects people in these parts of the world. So let's start off. The first value I would always look at is truth. Now, truth, as Einstein says, is it's conditional. I mean, we're not really smart people as a species. So how do you establish truth to any degree of satisfaction? The benchmarks I use are plenty of research. In other words, at least be on top of your brief, at least have as much knowledge of the subject as the person you're interviewing, or as much as possible. You can't always do that. The other bit is accuracy. In other words, if you're going to start quoting facts and statistics to people, don't give it as an opinion. Give it accurate or don't, or leave it out. And I say that's important because, no disrespect, Roman, the political class is very loose with stats. So anytime you get stats from political class, check them, verify them. Honesty, which I think is incredibly important to me. All of these things, when I do a program, these are almost second nature. I have never gone out to deceive people. You might disagree with me, I might get things wrong, but I never go out to deceive people. I won't say that's always been the case in this station, but that's the way that is something, if you're bringing in some sort of written guideline, it's a very important area, is to determine whether somebody just did a cock-up or whether they were deliberately trying to mislead an audience. The other bit is sensitivity. And I'm going to give you an example of what I consider this. And I'm not picking on anybody here. The person in question isn't here. We sent a chap once to open an exhibition. It was an Anne Frank exhibition down in Pearse Street Library. And the guy who was doing there, he was the usual. He had the Holocaust suit and so on and so forth. The chap we sent was from, shall we say, Middle Europe with a accented accent. Third question was, well, I won't do that to mock the man, how would you describe a typical day in Auschwitz? The interview didn't really last much longer because the sensitivity was there. And that also applies to language. Now, the most offensive word I've ever heard on this station is not a word most people would even understand. It's a word called kufir. It's almost like the N-word to people of, shall we say, a darker persuasion. It is a grossly offensive word, but it has been used regularly, and I think possibly in ignorance, but that's why one has to be sensitive about the audience. If you're pitching to one audience, they may find it one way, another audience may find it completely offensive, and that's why one has to be very, very careful of that. Now, unfortunately, some of the people who the next one is important about aren't here, so I'll try and do this. Balance, it's a fascinating subject, isn't it? Archimedes once said, I think it was Archimedes, he once said, give me a pole long enough and I'll balance the world on the end of it. And that's really the key to it. If you've got enough time or enough space or whatever, balance. It's very easy to pick on somebody on a particular program and say, that wasn't balanced, you know, so if I put on a subject, how do you do balance? Is it going to be linear or is it going to be lateral? So if I put on an abuse victim, do I have to put on a priest? If I put on, say, the classic case is if I put on, say, somebody who is a recovering addict, do I have to put on a recovering alcoholic? Or, you know, it's a very, very difficult area, and I'm not too sure you can actually draw hard and fast guidelines for it. And that's why we have to be careful as a station. It's everything to a certain degree is subjective. But I might have disagreements with Austin in political terms, but it doesn't mean my view is allowed to override Austin's, and vice versa. I mean, and that's why written standards in that particular area are very, no, I'm just saying that, I mean, it's a very, very difficult area to define. I'm not going to try and do it now.